who's a veteran, Mr. Yoram, in digitalization and automation. I think the company that we use today has been marketed by him across the globe. So Yoram Burg, he's a chief commercial officer with over 30 years of entrepreneurial experience that spanned across Asia, Middle East, North America. He brings with him an experience in multiple aspects of managing the various functions at multi-million dollar organization, applying experience gained in information technology, purchasing, business planning, project, and change management, to leading international teams in high-level strategic sales, marketing, and implementations. While holding various senior positions in technology and non-technology businesses, prior to joining SETI, Ram served as a VP of Sales of Embody Corporation, and before that, he was a president of NA, India, and Sri Lanka under Optitex and EFI. He is a graduate of MEI program from Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. Welcome on show, Mr. Ram. We're waiting to hear from you on how you really made digitalization. I think we would have just heard the word digitalization in the last decade, but I'm happy that you've been into this system for last 3 decades. So yeah, here we jump into the question. Few words to the audience, please.
Yes. First thing, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. And interestingly enough, you opened this session with a video that was focusing quite a bit around 3D, and for the right reasons, because I think that that's an important element. I work for a company called SETI. SETI in its core is a research company. For about 5 or 6 years, the company was and still is funded by the government of Spain, the European Commission, and other organizations, just for the purpose of conducting research of translating anything and everything that has to do with the physical aspect, such as yarn simulation or yarn in its real life form, onto a visualized yarn, and onwards from there into the use cases within our industry. So capturing the yarn for the purpose of creating digital materials, capturing the yarn for the purpose of doing 3D simulation, and ultimately also to consumer facing solutions such as a virtual try-on. So pretty cool company to work for. A lot of PhDs in our research and development area that fueled this research for the last so many years. More than happy to talk about it later more.
Amazing, amazing. So, I mean, like, you've been into DPC, which is digital product creation, for a long time. And I know this is a very basic question, but this is very important for the audience to know. So what's the pros to move on to a DPC? Why should I move on to a DPC? What is the advantage that a manufacturer or a brand would get from DPC?
Yeah, always a good question. I've been doing 3D for just about 20 years now, actually, almost exactly to the month. And I've seen it coming along, you know, from a point where it was just a bootstrap kind of activity, you know. Some of us may remember the emergence of this technology. At that time, it was received with, I would say, an equal amount of skepticism and curiosity. It was pretty clunky, okay, rather basic, you know, but it did capture the hearts of a few trailblazers who bootstrapped their organizations, you know, through the belief that the technology will one day change the way we work. And years later, and while no official data exists, I have to say, the belief is that just about 10 or more, or just about 10 to 15% of the fashion industry are actively using the 3D technology in the digital product creation process. The figure of those who purchase probably is higher, but you know, most of, you know, the rest of the numbers have actually not deployed the technology to the level that we thought. Now, the pros are just amazing, and they're out there. Communication and time saving as a consequence, right? When you communicate visually, you eliminate the chances for mistakes, the faster decision making, not just within the design, but also elsewhere. When you leverage the content onwards into other endpoints of the organization, such as e-commerce and so on, and you trust these images to be able to sell through e-commerce, which is another topic of discussion, and it serves its purpose. One version of the truth when you think about it. So less interpretation of a design intent, you know, back to the days of sending a block can be developed by the brand to the manufacturer, can be interpreted in multiple ways. And we've heard and know about the stories of not hitting the design intent or the block being developed accordingly. A reduction in sourcing of physical fabrics for the purpose of doing samples. We all know how much materials we consume right now just for the purpose of creating samples. I think that's one of the biggest areas of value here. Shipping costs, definitely an area of concern, especially at the time when, you know, COVID shut down the world in so many locations. 3D was thriving. Ultimately, everyone is saying, I want to reduce the number of physical samples. That's a goal to be had. The reduction in overall number of hands who are involved in the process. We just talked about our factory, right? Less human touching and more machines doing things. It's kind of where we can benefit with this technology as well. So less mistakes in that sense. And of course, I think for me, above everything else is sustainability and the environment.
Great, great. Who would not love to have a sample quickly made on a digital forum, not spend so much on a physical sample? Amazing. I think that is well said. Well, I mean, like I always hear challenges from the brand or a manufacturer that the DPC currently is slightly broken. You may correct me if I'm wrong. It's simple like that, right? So one person gives 3D and the other person gives a pattern, and the other physical properties are identified by a different platform. To really bring in all the channels together, or all the partners together, is slightly difficult. And the integration also between the vertical, firstly, the user have to get used to the system, and then we have to integrate the multiple parts of it. So what's the view, and how is it going to be changing in the near future?
Yeah, how it's going to change is up to us as vendor providers. But I think that understanding the path to the solution, we first have to understand where the problem is. And I just don't think 3D is going away anytime, anywhere. It's just going to become a lot better. But let's figure out like where the problem is. And most recently, I think it was the tail end of 2022, I was at the auto conference in Detroit, and I was asked to speak and compare between, you know, what are the reasons that 3D has been so well accepted in the automotive, aerospace, architecture industry, and it is kind of like like you describe it, disjointed and slow and difficult to adapt in the apparel industry. Although some companies are doing pretty well with it. So some of the points that I brought up in my presentation back then was materials. Of course, we're speaking about two different industries. Apparel industry has soft materials, something that happens less or not existing in the other industries. We're looking at things like roles and titles, things that exist beautifully in the worlds of architecture, automotive, and others, such as R&D manager. I mean, when I used to go in and pitch companies on adopting 3D, they used to say, well, speak to the IT, but it's not exactly an IT solution. And then they say, oh, speak to the pattern maker, but it's not also exactly a pattern making solution. It kind of requires a role of research and development, someone who looks into the well-being of technology within the organization. So we need to develop those roles and the titles and the people who own such processes. And, you know, we start to see white spaces, innovation spaces, and so on and so forth. I also think that, you know, education industry. So while in the other industries, it's mandatory to go through such training, in our industry, it's still optional. Okay. And it's still not carefully or nicely formulated to a point that you have a program that delivers a ready-made 3D artist to the market, you know, and it's very hard to come by and find these individuals to begin with. More than anything, I think the other industries have an ecosystem that was developed around this, the need for 3D. So from surface design to PLM integration, it's all done digitally in the other industries, offering interoperability between systems, something that, again, does not exist in our industry. So we have solution done from one provider to another provider and so on, and they just don't talk to one another. I mean, it's like saying that in order to read a PDF file, I'll need to buy a Mac computer, a PC computer, a Chrome computer, and so on, just so I can read that file. Well, guess what? It doesn't happen in real life. Should not happen to us here as well. Another big thing that happens in other industries is direct link to production, okay, which we still don't have. I mean, most of us who have been working with 3D will probably be able to say, I have one pattern for design and production. I have one pattern for my 3D visualization. It's not an engineered-based translation between the two. And then the culture to support the effort. So all these things are really some of the areas. that we see the differences between the industries. And as far as the challenges, wow, there are a number of them. It's a siloed operation right now. It's confined to a location, a person, a set of equipment. There is a cost for hardware, cost for software. The supporting solution are kind of separate from the main streamline or the mainstream of what the solution is, such as imagine fabric testing equipment, right? It's a slow process. It requires machinery. So again, we go manual for something that's supposed to be digital. Additional rendering, for example, lack of process automation. There is so little AI in this business and machine learning that it just begs the question, when is that coming? Training that can take months for a single individual. And then what happens when the person leaves you, right? The overall speed of operation is kind of on the slow side. There is IT people that are involved in the process, cost of, and then it adds on and on and on. But the bottom line of all of this, as far as to your question, where it's headed, should we abandon the process? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. There are multiple things that we can do to increase the adoption all around, while we understand the limitations and operating within those, just like Suchira said just a few minutes ago. Let's not wait for the final solution to be there, because it probably will never be at that stage. There will never be an end for a solution, especially when we talk about artificial intelligence that keeps reinventing itself and learning every single day, right? Ask me if there is a last version for AI. There isn't, and probably there will never be one. So what we can do, we can create a culture for adoption. Number one thing, I think, within the organization. We heard that on the discussion about the dark factory. We heard it on the turnaround times for Suchira's companies, 9 to 14 days. Wow, that's just to be commended. A culture within the supply chain partners to bring them all together. So I know in India there were some initiations of knowledge management centers, technology management centers, also acronymed as KMC and TMC, developing non-existent roles, as I mentioned before, such as R&D managers, engineers of sorts, and so on. We got to think online, right, as we go for solutions 4.0 and more and beyond in terms of the delivery. Can we still work with on-prem? Yes, we can. Should we? Probably not. We need to trust what we're doing, especially with this technology, and leverage what's available right now. We need to go for any solution that is all about de-skilling. We heard it from Suchira as well. Anything that is de-skilling and promoting teamwork, right? That brings the product a lot quicker. And finally, I would say, think collaboration and leverage new technologies. I think I just mentioned manual way of capturing a material so we can use it in 3D. How about using artificial intelligence for that, right? It works for you instead of you working for the technology. So a long-winded answer for
absolutely. And I mean, like, at least when I go through the profile of SETI, it covers the entire the portfolio, right? The portfolio is about physical properties. How do you do what 3D, how do you do a DPC, and how do you put it on an avatar, what kind of a stitching. I mean, like, it's amazing. I think the entire ecosystem should come together so that it's easy for the user. Of course, the technology is for user and it has to be as easy as possible, right? Yeah. Coming to the industry 4.0, how does a human intervention can be reduced because of DPC? I mean, like, if I have to touch a fabric and tell this is what a single jersey, this is what is interlock, this could be the GSM, this could be the weight of the garment in oven, and this could be the compression. So what do you think that the digitalization or automation can help reduce the intervention?
Yeah, great point. I think much like the changes we saw through the years in how production became more automated, shifting from manual cutting to automatic cutting. We went from table pattern making to digital pattern making, and so we got to think in terms of steps to get there rather than conquering the target. Taking those small steps changes how human intervene in the digital product creation process, not eliminate, but change it, right? Make it a lot more smarter for the individual and also for the process. So I just mentioned before, something that my company is currently doing and basing all our technology on. Number one is web deployment, right? I mean, we don't need to buy a $3,000 computer just so I can do a $20 piece of garment, right? But I should be able to use it anywhere, any place, anytime on a simple set of equipment. I have to able to rely on artificial intelligence because our business is relying on quantities, right? I mean, for the most part in mass production and so on, you rely on quantities. And we cannot just do it by a human start to finish. We have to rely on technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So to capture a fabric, for example, for their digital twin, I don't have to go through a process that takes me 2 hours, doing the maps in one place, doing the physical capturing on another piece of device. And before you know it, the end of the day has arrived and I haven't reached my daily delivery goal. We can start to see some first attempt in automation 3D creation, such as parametric blocks. You know, some vendors are actually bringing some early stages of solutions that automate things. So that's a good place in where we're headed. Moving 3D online to take advantage of collaboration and co-creation, from initial design, if you will, all the way to consumer acquisition or customer acquisition. I think that's an area that is much to be desired, because all the solutions that we have right now are on-prem, which means if you want to achieve some sort of collaboration, you have to create other means to do so. And that's like, again, imagine, I'm always like to borrow analogies, having an iPhone, one for emails, one for text messages, and one for surfing online. It doesn't make much sense. We have to be able to bring them all together and collaborate. We also need to see some pipelines for automation, you know, in post-processing, such as moving assets to the cloud. If those are not there yet, as I just mentioned, I hope that, you know, everyone is considering heading in that direction. Operate at the back end of the processing. So, for example, like advanced rendering, right? I mean, right now that pipeline is very slow and doesn't allow for scale. All right. So if you bring it online, and we have server farms and 3D rendering farms and all that stuff that already exist out there, we can leverage those and let the operator still do other things. I know it may sound like a wish or a dream, but operating most, if not all of the above that I mentioned, digital material capturing, 3D solutions and so on, right from within PLM. Okay. PLM for many companies is the source of truth. Now, how great it is if you can give designers a view for what they're working on, and much like you give the merchandising people and everyone else upstream the ability to interact, work with the content all the way through PLM to gain visibility, accessibility, use cases outside of product development, such as in e-commerce and onwards to, for example, the consumer-facing part of the business. So all of a sudden, we can see that, you know, the value proposition is about to become a lot more compelling for brands and their supplies, just then doing 3D for the purpose of doing a faster physical sample. Much less human intervention, but maintaining human interaction. Okay, so we're moving out of intervention into interaction because humans can do things that machines cannot. As far as the field, you know, to touch something and so on and so forth, it's very interesting, because to date, the 3D technology has been all about almost there, but never there kind of results. You know, it's like I'm going to send my car to the garage and the mechanic will say, well, I almost fixed your car, but I haven't exactly fixed your car. I mean, we don't accept almost there, but never there. Why do we accept it in the world of 3D? We should not. As example, stitches. Okay, stitches has been a big challenge for 3D. Okay, some companies that are heavy on stitching, such as Lululemon. And I've seen such garments coming out where the stitch inside doesn't look like the stitch outside, baked textures, so on and so forth. Yarn simulation, as I mentioned before, and those things don't exist, okay? But that's not how the real world works. So how do we bring them all together? I think there is really ability. For example, if you think about 3D again, seam allowance is not exactly the way you do 3D. Well, technologies are coming around right now doing it from the seam allowance. So let's think evolution rather than revolution. The past 20 years has come a long way. I feel the next 5 is probably going to equal what happened in the last 10. So a lot to look for. And quickly we can move on from there. Think about artificial intelligence, machine learning. We leveraging those now more in other areas of our life. We need to. I can speak from experience to what our company has been researching, you know, in this space for the past 6 years or so, with some 14 PhDs just focused on that, some 50 academic papers we already published in that sense, and multiple patents that we own on the technology. So it's a different way in how we think about bringing these technologies. And my final note, and that's hopefully where I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker, is where India can benefit from this. And I think that, you know, India has been amazing in the journey that I've taken working in the Indian market for the last 10 years or so, visiting dozens of times, walking into so many factories and seeing operations and processes. So much have changed, and so much have changed for the better. I so echo what Suchira was saying before. I think that, India has an opportunity, an amazing opportunity to shift from following to leading, in the sense of, don't think that your buyers know exactly what they're doing when it comes to digital product creation. A lot of them are still exploring and experimenting and shifting from one solution to another. But it's not about shifting from one to another. It's about having the best of breed. That's where you, as manufacturers, sourcing managers, and so on, can come in and lead. And I think that many times what I've seen is that's what they expect you to do. Okay, lead by example, lead by change, initiate those ideas, drive that innovation, and offer them better ways to do things. Sometimes they come and say, we decided to go with solution A, solution B, but we don't have a house that's controlled by one vendor. Why should we have a business that's controlled by one? Have the best of breed, drive that innovation to your buyers, lead by examples, they will follow.
Amazing, Yoram. Intervention to interaction, following to leading. That's really an amazing speech today. And thank you so much for all your insights.